Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Irgin Shir Teramos is Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir. To have the great schus of sponsoring a shir called Irgin Shir Teramos 718-851-8651. Email ist@shivanet.com. Tonight's shir is learned as a schus of Shlema for Paralesta Baschava B'Sei Yisroel. Tonight's shir is also learned of schus of Shlema for Bnos and Meir Ben Adasa B'Sei Yisroel. Tonight we have the cover to have with us once again Rabbi Yisroel Grossberg Shlita Menahel, Binah Seminary, Menahel Naavah, to speak on teaching Emunah in troubling times. So we covered the call on Rabbi Grossberg for tonight's Rosh.
Thank you very much. It's a covet to be here. I feel like it's a little bit of a cycle. Every year, Rabbi Bould says, please don't thank me. And I say, okay, I'll listen. And every year I stand up and say, how can you not thank him? The man worked so hard to prepare the shurim. I got to see up close as I played around with the schedule myself, what goes into trying to create for different speakers' schedules and the listeners' schedules, everything. There's so much that goes into it. It's done with such a real interest in creating Harbatzas HaTorah and creating for the community these opportunities. It's a tremendous Yashakayach to Rabbi Bould, Rabbi Deutsch, the Irgun Shirei Torah. So the title for tonight is about teaching Emunah. But I was thinking about it, we really can't teach something that we don't know. If we're empty, we can't fill up someone else. Famous mashal, they always say in the airplanes, for those who are listening before you take off and they give you the safety information, that when the air, I don't know what they're called, but when the things that fall down to help you with breathing, chas v'sholom, there's a decompression of air on the plane, oxygen. All right, thank you. So, oxygen masks. So they tell you that first put on yours and then put on for your children. Now, for many people, that's counterintuitive because let me take care of my kids first. I'm not worried about myself, or my children are my first priority. But they explain that unless you're breathing properly, you're not good for anyone else. There's no way for you to help anybody unless you're breathing properly. So when we talk about teaching Emunah, I think we really have to first talk to ourselves, how are we doing in the area of Emunah? And I was thinking to myself, if this was taking place a year ago, so conversations in Emunah would be about Parnasa, it'd be about maybe Shidduchim, all important things. But within the last year, in the last few months, the concepts of Emunah and B'tachin and believing in the Rabbi Yisroel when it's difficult to believe have taken on a whole new meaning. And not things that are happening on the other side of the world, but things that are happening literally in our backyard. I think one of the best things this year, I'm up in camp in the mountains, one of the best things is that I don't have access to the news. It's difficult to listen to. It's very hard to hear. I have relatives in France who sent a video last night to what's going on there as the far left has won, and the protests, burning in the streets, the anti-Jewish sentiment that's not hidden but right out in the open. The video I saw last night literally could have been from Nazi Germany. So when we talk about Emunah this year, it's a much different conversation because the challenges to our Emunah are much greater. We'll call it the mechitzas, that which separates us from the Rabbi Yisroel is a little bit thicker, a little bit more difficult. So how do we reassure ourselves? Right? For someone to just say, oh, I believe I don't have anything to worry about, I can walk down the street, I can walk here, I can go on the train, that's silly. That's not Emunah. Emunah means that we have an understanding of what's proper hishtadlus, what we need to do to make sure that we're well taken care of, and at the same time, how we show our trust, our belief that the Rabbi Yisroel is in charge and taking care. The template for the age-old war that takes place between Esav and Yaakov really goes back to Sarei Shel Esav. At the time that Yaakov Avinu fought with the Malach of Esav That was the time that we'll say the forces of good versus the forces of evil. And there's an interesting conversation that takes place at the end of that battle. They start talking about names. Ma shmecha hagidina, what's your name? Lama zeh tishal shmi, what do you need to know my name for? Where does this names all of a sudden, where does names start to play a role in this whole conversation? But really, Yaakov Avinu is saying, Ma shmecha, I want to know your essence. I want to know who you are because I need to know the enemy. You can't fight the enemy that you don't know. So when he was asking Sarya Shalesa for his name, he didn't want to know what his name was to write him a certificate for fighting well or whatever it is that he had planned to do. He wanted to know, now that I know that there's an enemy, I want to know what is the essence of that enemy. And we're told that that's our achrayus. Think into things. Nothing happens by mistake. It's our achrayus that when events happen, whether they're happy events, scary events, difficult events, we have an obligation to stop and ask, Ma shmecha. We do have to ask the questions. Because there are things that stand in the way of Emunah. And, many people like to say that it's true, it's not true, you can sit and debate, that perhaps generations ago, or not even that many generations ago, Emunah was something that was kind of built into the system. We got it from our parents, and we didn't ask questions. The reality is that Bisman Hazeh, we live in a door where people are asking a lot of questions. And it's incumbent on us to have the answers so that when they hear and they talk to us, we're really having a conversation rather than accept it. Yeah, truly, Emunah Pshuta is something that we're supposed to just accept. But we also have to know our audience, and we have to know that the kids today, what they need. What stands in the way? So simply, fear is a biggie. I'm afraid. You're going to tell me the Rebbeinu Shalom? I don't see the Rebbeinu Shalom. So how am I supposed to know? You're telling me that something is going to take care of me that I don't see. And if I'm not doing things the way I am, I also don't feel. There's an inability to see. And we have an inability to remember, right, past successes. We could stop and look at Klal Yisrael, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on. We have no business being alive and here today. By every metric, any way that one measures how a nation survives and thrives and goes, we shouldn't be here. So many times that it looked like the Jewish people were about to be extinct, that we were going to go back into the history books, and we're still here. But we forget. And that's one of the things that stands in the way. We also sometimes think that life was meant to be good and happy. So when we're faced with a challenge, where's that coming from? But the answer is that's not necessarily the case. Not that we should look at things in a negative way, that life wasn't meant to be happy. But there are challenges that are going to face us, and the sooner we grow up and accept that there are challenges in our lives, and that this is part of life, this is part of our Nisayan, this is part of the world that the Rebbeinu Shalom has set up for us, the sooner we can walk into the Geder of Emunah. So we'll talk about a number of topics, a number of ideas on the issue of Emunah, and hopefully something will resonate and something that we can take away with us. The Ritva and the Rashbam, when discussing the Churban, they talk about the concept of something called a nes l'ra. What is a nes l'ra? When we think about a nes, Kriyas Yamsuf was a nes. Klal Yisrael was saved because of the nes. Other times that there's a salvation, we talk about a nes. But really, a nes means that there's a clear manifestation of Yad Hashem. And sometimes that clear manifestation takes place l'ra, for bad things. That the Kruvim were hugging each other at the time of the Churban was a nes l'ra. We were in a bad place, right? Calling a nes in the middle of the Churban. But a nes means that the Rebbeinu Shalom is involved. Anyone who can look at some of the anti-Semitic events that take place and not to see that it can only be Yad Hashem that's involved, because they make no sense. Going back, take the blood libels, right? I don't know where you guys get your matzahs from, but where is that coming from? Where's any sort of logic to this idea of a blood libel? But yet it was mamish in the fabric and the psyche of everyone that was there. They believed it. Everybody said not that many years ago. You can look it up. I did. September 22nd, 1928, in upstate New York. Okay, the person who wrote it, it's hard to believe that was a long time ago, but when the girls showed up, who they thought had been killed, They didn't say, we're sorry to the Jews. They said, oh, you see, there are a bunch of witches. They brought her back from the dead. And everyone accepted it. 1928, we're not talking that in primitive times. Maybe we think about blood libels took place when people were superstitious. Unbelievable. It can only be the Ribono Shel Olam. If that is being allowed to happen, it's a message for us, and the message is coming clearly from the Ribono Shel Olam. Pogroms that was started. Totally insane ideas. There was one time, there was one massacre that took place because there was a claim. I don't know all the terminology that I copied, but there was a claim that the Jews were torturing the host. The host being that evidently they passed around a wafer in the church, and people said testimony that they heard because of the Jews that the wafer was crying. And because of that, the pain that was caused to their wafer in their church, they massacred the Jews. You're going to tell me that this was something that was logical? Whenever we see something, so although it's painful to really to look into this, that's Yad Hashem. And if Yad Hashem is there in the negative, we know Yad Hashem will be there in the positive also. And sometimes it's a little bit of an avodah, it's a little bit of a job on our part to move over and to take that understanding and bring it to on the positive side, but that's what we need to do. It comes from the left, it comes from the right. We were told we can only be money lenders back in Europe, and then there's all sorts of rumors that went around because we're money-grubbing people, and we have this old trope that Jews are all into money. You were the ones who made us the money lenders. Rabbi Yisroel, we're not talking about something from many years ago. Just today, as I mentioned, I have the schus not to listen to the news, but I drove in for the mountains today. So I was just thinking about it. There was a hospital that was bombed. Russia bombed a hospital in the Ukraine. Do you see any universities having major rallies and complaints? Do you see it? Nothing, not a word. Israel bombs, and they bomb a hospital that was proven to be a terrorist site, and the whole world goes crazy, and there's all sorts of... Doesn't make any sense. How is it shaykh that this went on, and not a peep from anybody? And everyone's accepting it. The whole world accepts it. This can only be Yad Hashem, as difficult as it is to accept. And this goes back, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us that Har Sinai, the name Har Sinai, comes from a lashon of sinah. The hatred that came to the world on Har Sinai, it was a hatred that came from a sense of jealousy. They're jealous of the fact that we have a Torah. And that's why they have such a hard time with us. The historians look at us that we shouldn't be here, like we said. We represent a complete contradiction to everything that they believe in. It's easy to be a maimin when things are good. I have a friend who's in the stock market, and so you can't make this stuff up. And he'll tell me that sometimes in the stock market things go well, and sometimes not as well. So when things go good, he looks at me and says, "So what I did? I had a forecast. I saw what was going on. I read the signs in the future, and I was able to read and see what the next big thing was." Gewaldig. Every time he loses money, he says, "Es bashert." So I said, I don't understand. The Ribono Shel Olam is only there when something goes wrong, and when it's good. The Ribono Shel Olam is in the good, in the bad, and he's with us at all times. And it should be a nechama to us that the Ribono Shel Olam is with us. He's with us at that time. And sometimes the best thing we can tell our children, there's a danger in trying to explain things that are, if not impossible, but very difficult to explain. Because once you start explaining, what you're saying is, there is an explanation. And if there's an explanation that they don't buy and they don't accept, you have a problem. On the other hand, sometimes the best thing we can learn and tell ourselves is that as believing Yidden, we understand that we don't understand. And that's okay. Because there's something going on here that's going on in the greater universe that's well beyond our understanding. Maybe we will understand one day, maybe we won't. Maybe we'll be zoichet to look back and say, oh, that's why this was like this, and that's why we... Maybe. But definitely not something that we can rely on. If we understand that we don't understand. And a simple mashal that I always tell Talmidim, if you're on a bus going, well, let's pick current events. You're on a bus going from Brooklyn to Lakewood. And you notice that while they're on the Staten Island Expressway, They get off. The bus gets off. And he's going around on side streets. And you don't understand. You know this is not the way you go. You stay on the Staten Island Expressway straight. So you decide you're going to have a word with the bus driver. And as you walk to the bus driver, you see that's Moshe, the bus driver. He says, Moshe, the bus. Moshe is the best bus driver that there is. I know this company. I've gone with it. Moshe, no questioning Moshe. He knows. If he's going out, he must know that there's either a traffic jam up ahead, there's a problem. If he's doing it, I can go back to my seat, rest and relax. I don't even have to know what the problem is. I can trust. It's that simple. If we trust the bus driver, we can go back to our seat and accept. Are we happy about the diversion? Absolutely not. Are we happy that we got off? We know our trip is going to be longer. And maybe now, because we're going on side streets, he has harder turns to make. And it's all the problems that go in. If it's a little maybe simplistic to compare our lives to a bus ride, but it's that idea that when as difficult as things are, if we trust the bus driver, capital B, then we can sit back and know that as difficult as it may be, someone's in charge, the Rabbi Shalom is there. And in that sense, we are simply soldiers following orders. If you speak to a soldier, I have some Talmidim who are Chayalim, speaking to them about the Matzah B'Nei. But one day, I remember speaking to them a while ago, and saying, Rebbe, I don't know, you probably thought I couldn't listen to anyone. You'd be shocked what goes on over here. They say march, I don't ask questions. They say dance, I don't ask questions. One of them points out, Rebbe, if you had a rifle, okay, whatever, but we're not going there. But Lamaisa, that a soldier understands. You don't ask questions. You don't understand. There's a greater war going on that you're just a small piece of. That's what a soldier is, and that's ultimately what we need to do. In Hallel, we say, Ani avdecha ben amosecha, well-known vart. What's avdecha ben amosecha? I am the servant, the son of your maidservant. I'm your servant. Who cares who my brother was? I'm saying I'm a servant to the Rabbi Shalom. But there's a difference between someone who's born a servant, meaning that he was born into a family of servants. The mother was a servant. They don't know any other life. Someone who they themselves became a servant, so they remember the life of freedom. They remember, they think about, they had their own ideas. They thought for themselves once upon a time. Ani avducha ben amasech Rabbi Shalom, I have no questions. Because I know this is where I'm supposed to be. I know this is what my life is, and I can accept that. And in a way, this explains something that I've seen throughout my life. I saw just as recently, unfortunately, so I davened in a shul where, for whatever reason, they had all the news early on Simchas Torah. A lot of different versions of the news, but it was horrifying. Those of us that had kids in Eretz Yisrael, it was not just horrifying, it was downright scary. We all have relatives in Eretz Yisrael. How did we dance Hakafis? We should have just canceled it, okay? Cancel Hakafis and sit and say, how did we dance Hakafis? But the answer is the same Rebbeinu Shalom that's creating world events in Eretz Yisrael told us to have Hakafis. And that's what the life of a Yid is. If the Rebbeinu Shalom says, this is what the Choiv Hazman is, this is what we're supposed to be doing, that's how we danced on a Simchas Torah, despite our pain. I have a vivid memory, for those who remember, Rav Moshe's yahrzeit, Rav Moshe's Levaya, I believe it was on Tainus Esther. And I remember being at my Rebbe's house, that Purim, and he was singing B'Simcha with tears rolling down his face. And I couldn't understand it. And he said, there's a Chi of Simcha right now. I'm lost. He hasn't been a Talmud or Rabbi. I'm lost without my Rebbe. The tears, I can't help them. But I have a Chi of Simcha, and that's what the life of a Yid is. It's not what we call a fair-weathered friend. Rabbi Shalom, when you're doing good, okay, we're here for you. But if you're not, then we have a problem. We're not necessarily going to do what we're supposed to. No. A soldier does what they're supposed to do if they're afraid, if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're homesick, if they're tired. Soldier does. And if we can put ourselves in that matzav, in that frame of mind, and give that over to our children and Talmidim as well, then that's what a Yid is. Both in the good and in the bad. Both when things are good and not. And even look, the end of the Siyam Sefer Torah itself, the words were written in tears, right? Yet we make a Siyam on a Sefer Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu dies, let's sing and dance. How does that make any sense? We're recounting the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, and then we go, but that's, the Rabbi Shalom tells us what to do. And As good soldiers, we sing and dance. That is the life of a Yid. The Rebbeinu Shalom is with us in the pain and in the simcha. So sometimes there are many issues that we can know intellectually, and we could sit and talk about, and even give a shir about. But how do we take that mekoyach al poil? How do we take it and actually make it real for ourselves, ultimately to be able to give over? So it's interesting. If you think about the 10 makas, right? If the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to show force, wouldn't it have been amazing if, right, instead of dumb, he just freed Klal Yisrael? What was the point of 10 makas? What was the point of 10 makas? And the first bring down that the 10 makas were comparable to the 10 nisyonos of Avram Avinu. What's the comparison? Both were trips. Both were, to use the therapist's word, journeys. They were on the journey. Understanding that things don't happen overnight. Klal Yisrael was going from avodim to free people. They needed a process. They needed to, and each makkah was another step forward. Emunah doesn't happen like this. And often if it does, it's not real. Any Rebbe will tell you that you watch, if you have a Talmud that changes right away in a positive way, sometimes the most important thing you can do with that Talmud is slow him down. You know, I have Talmudim sometimes, they come back from Eretz Yisrael, big black hat, thick tits out, slow down, you know? First question is your girlfriend's number still in your phone? But it's an understanding that there has to be a process. Just like Avram Avinu also. The 10 says each one of the Nisayos of Avram Avinu was another step forward. Each one of the Makkos was another step forward for us. So we have to understand that this doesn't happen like I believe. We have to work on ourselves. It's an avodah to believe. And it's especially an avodah to believe in times like this. When Klal Yisrael was dealing with the Magefa, how did the Rebbeinu Shalom tell Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he tell him to do? He said to take a snake and to put it up on a post that the Klal Yisrael will see the snake, and they're not a real snake. And from that, they'll be cured from the Magefa. So Farshim asked, just cure them, okay? Or put the luchais up on a snake. Look at a snake. That's going to be the problem. That's how we're going to solve it. The Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to show specifically the snake, specifically the lowest of the animals, the animal itself that creates the makkah. That can come. The Rebbeinu Shalom can be found. The Yeshua can be found in the snake. Zdafka, look up at that snake. The snake that's on the floor, usually. The snake that's the lowest. The snake that was cursed. The Rebbeinu Shalom can be there with us in the difficult times as well. The Yeshua can come from the lowest of places. We see the Mishlei, when talking about Emunah, and this is a Yisodistic idea in Emunah. Birchas Hashem hi te'asher v'al Yosef etzev imo. That the Rebbeinu Shalom, we're told that our Ashirus, not only Ashirus, but really what we have comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That we know. But how much, what are we supposed to do when it comes to our level of Hishtadlus? Right? You know, that's always been an age-old question. Hishtadlus versus Emunah. You know, if you talk about Emunah, what are we supposed to be doing? Should I be running to 150 Shadchanim? Should I just wait for the phone to ring? Should I keep sending out resumes? Well, again, it's simple. The Pasuk is telling us, realize that it all comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. But when it comes to etzem, when it comes to where there's pain involved and frustration, it means then that you're trying too hard. And it's a balance to understand. It's a balance to understand the level of acceptance. But if you find yourself in that idea of frustration, and anger maybe is a strong word, then that means that you've gone too far. And this really applies to everything that we do in our lives. Because if the Rebbeinu Shalom is there, then that frustration shouldn't be there. Belief in Hashem is what takes away the frustration. Do you need to try? Absolutely. But if you feel that you've reached that point where it's not supposed to be there. You know, they say the joke that a guy passes by, he sees one person digging, and as this person digs a ditch, the next person right next to him fills it in. And then another guy digs, another one fills it in. And the same guy fills it in. So he goes over to him and says, what are you doing? It doesn't seem to make sense. I understand you dig, but you dig and he fills in. What's the point? So I said, I'll tell you the truth. We really normally have a third person working with us. So I dig, that third person puts a seed in, and then this other guy fills it in afterwards. But since he can't make it today, we figured we shouldn't sit, Yoshev Batel and do nothing, so we'll still do the work without him. That's working without the Rebbeinu Shalom. You think you're digging, you're doing nothing. You're accomplishing zero. Without the seed, when we're working, we have to feel the Rebbeinu Shalom on our side and to realize that we're not in charge. So a number of years ago, I was an assistant English principal. I wanted to get a kapara. No, I was assistant English principal in yeshiva, and there was a young man who often needed a timeout, so he used to hide in my office. If I'm being honest, he hid from the principal. I was assistant principal, he hid from the principal in my office. I hope he's not listening. But I felt that he was being given a tough time, and he had a lot of hakaras hatov. Story was over. I didn't see him again. Happens to be, interestingly, that I saw a sign that I think the Hatzalah baseball game is tonight. I don't know who they play, the police? They play whatever. So this has actually happened that night. I was with my kids. We were in Marine Park, and my daughter tripped over something, and she's probably listening now saying, Todd, don't talk about me, but whatever. And she literally cut open her forehead. Now, I would like to suggest to anyone, if you decide to have a medical emergency, don't do it on the night that all Hatzalah members are playing baseball. It's just not the right time. But anyway, Baruch Hashem, at least there was one guy who was available, and he came, and he took one look. He says, you are going to need not just some stitches, but you're going to need plastic surgery. It was July 4th, I remember now. And it was hard. People weren't open, people weren't around. We called a pediatrician. Baruch Hashem, she was available. She'd come over. And I guess this is the advantage of having a frum pediatrician. She starts looking. I said, what are you looking at? Trying to think if the shekel will cover it, or if there's going to be, what do you call it, a bruise that, to be shown. Yeah, scar, thanks. Anyways, so she says, you need an expert for this, otherwise it's going to be a problem. But who's available July 4th at night? She says, there's someone in Manhattan, big doctor, I'll call him. She calls this doctor in Manhattan. Nisa happens to be, this doctor is in Maimonides right now taking care, because his nephew needed stitches, and he's there. And as only, okay, I don't want to start with doctors, but certain doctors will do, he said, I'll wait till I finish with my nephew, and I'm leaving. So if you're here in time, great. If you're not, not. So I was excited about the opportunity to drive in that way, to get there on time. And I go running, and we go in, and we're holding this thing against her face, her forehead. And if you've ever been to Maimonides in the emergency room, you don't just walk in. You walk into a room full of people who are already signed in. And I go right away. I said, I have to go right away because the doctor said he's going to leave. Write your name down, then you can sit down, and we'll call you when we're ready. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm showing the thing. And said, write your name down. And I was going, I'm usually a pretty calm guy. So there's a patient representative who was called, who's supposed to smooth these things over. Patient representative comes out, takes one look at me, says, Rabbi Grossberg, who's that boy who I hid under my desk? He said, come with me. I held back from any facial expressions towards the lady who kept telling me to sit down, but there was a little victory dance as I walked in. And sure enough, the doctor had his coat on. He was on his way out. And we came. He did the stitches. I remember when we were being discharged, they said, one second, you're not even in the computer. How did you get in? You're not in the computer. I said, don't ask questions. So they first had to admit us and discharge us right away afterwards. And Baruch Hashem, story has a happy ending. So again, there's so many stories, so many points over here that could be a major coincidence. But the split-second timing that this doctor happened to be, who's in Manhattan, and he happens to have rights that he's allowed to work in my mind, is that, there's so much here within this story, and I'm sure everyone has a story like this. You have to think about it sometimes. It doesn't, big nisim, a person was on his way to the airport, and he gets stuck in traffic, and the airplane crashes into a mountain. Okay, that, that we think about. Well, we shouldn't have to think about. But simple things that are not so simple. The Rebbeinu Shalom is with us in all. So how much do we have to try? You have to try. But we also have to know that the Rebbeinu Shalom is there with us. But a lot of this doesn't work without a relationship. What do I mean? A child trusts their parent implicitly, at least until a certain age. Because it's the parent. The parent does so much for them, child trusts their parent. And even when the parent sometimes gives a patch, and even when the parent sometimes gets angry, and even when the parent does whatever it is that parents need to do, the child still trusts the parent because there's a relationship. If we don't have a relationship with Hashem, or if we try to create the relationship when we're in trouble, right? All of a sudden, we start saying Tehillim for the first time when we have a tzara. It's very hard emotionally. Not that Rabbi Yisroel doesn't listen to those tefillas, but emotionally for ourselves, how are we connecting to that? You can't wake up now. There has to be a connection. As a Rebbe, I remember I once had a student Rebbe who was in my classroom, who was observing me, and I said a sharp comment to one of my students, and the observing Rebbe came over to me. I don't want to ask. I'm sure you had a reason, but I learned you're never supposed to do that. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what. Go, let's look at the damage. Go speak to that Talmud and ask him, how he handled that line. So he went to the student, and the student said, yeah, well, my Rebbe's great. I love him. He loves me. That's what. I told you know that I have students that get upset if I don't say things to them like that, because that's how we talk. That's how we schmooze it. If you have a relationship, they know that you love them. If they know that you love them, you can do anything. If we have that relationship and something goes wrong, it's not the Rebbe Shalom abandoned us. No, we have the relationship. The Rebbe Shalom loves us. There's a reason that this had to happen. Acceptance, not easy. I'm not in any way saying that tzaras are easy to accept in any which way. Chas v'shalom. But perhaps there's a level of acceptance. And that really boils down in the last couple of parshas, when we try to figure out Pshat and Kairach, Pshat and Klal Yisrael B'chlal. How do you have, right, this week's parsha, Miriam dies, the well dries up, right away. They're starting up with Moshe Rabbeinu and saying things that just don't even make sense. We should, how do you take us out of Mitzrayim? It's not the first time they said it. How do we understand the Dardeya, the Eichlei Hamon? They lived a life of Nisim. We struggled to see the Yad Hashem. They saw the Yad Hashem right front and center to themselves. How is it that they still struggled with their Emunah and their B'tachon? So Siva Shalom talks about it, and he brings down the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that he feels can answer the question. Perek Beis, Mishnah Yud Gimel. Yochanan ben Zakkai now is talking to his Talmidim, and he's asking them to find a derech tova. What's the right way? Amar lahem tzuru u ezi derech tova sheyidbak, and essentially that he used the lashon sheyidbak, to grab onto. Hoylech maybe would make sense. What are they grabbing on? Siva Shalom says that we're seeing over here that we're talking about dveikus. We're talking about grabbing. We're talking about not just being a observer, but actually being someone who holds on. And then, so we have the Gedolei Hadar, his Talmidim with the Gedolei Hadar, and they give their advice. Rebbe Lezer Omer, Ayin Toiva. Rebbe Lezer says, a good eye. What does it mean good eye? It doesn't mean good eyesight, but rather that, Pashut Pshat, we think, you forget, you look at people, and you're okay with the fact that maybe they have more, you can accept. Rebbe Shua Omer Chaver Tov, have a good friend. Rebbe Yisroel Omer Shachen Tov, have a good neighbor. Rebbe Shimon Omer Haroyas HaNoilot, to be able to see the future. Doesn't mean literally see the future, but to be able to kind of expect and understand what's coming. So Shiva Shalom asked a simple question. He said, these are Gedolei Hadar. And we're trying to figure out what's the best way for us to get close to Hashem. This is the best way. Ayin Tov. I mean, it's a nice idea. It's good. It's a good midah to have. But that's what is the midah, sheyidbak ba'ha'adam, that brings that dveikus, that brings that closeness. And he explains that Ayin Tova really refers to how you see everything in the world. Rav Wolbe Zatzal, Shkiach always used to say that the glasses that you put on in the morning will decide your day. Everyone puts on a pair of glasses in the morning. Some people put on a happy pair, an unhappy pair, a critical pair. We see everything through the lens of how we wake up and our frame of mind as we go through the day. And we all know that you could have two people that see the exact same event, two people that see everything, things that could be totally bad or totally good, and each one sees it their way. because one has the good glasses on and one has the negative glasses on. One has the positive, one has the negative. So ayin tova doesn't just mean to look at things nicely, to be okay with other people's. It means that everything that you see is Yad Hashem. Famous mashal from the Chavetz Chaim. That what is this Yad, the seeing ayin tova? The barrel. He talks about the Geir Shabbos. But if you have a barrel and you see that there's one spout that comes, so water's coming out, you want more water to come out. So you think you're going to create that there'll be more water, you put a second, it's the same amount of water just coming out faster. That's the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's all coming from Hashem. It's not pshat. Hashem gave you this, and now you're going to go do this. You're taking from the same place. It's all the Rebbeinu Shalom. Ayin Tova is how we see things. And that creates a dveikus. That creates a connection, because if we understand whatever happened, if we make the bus, it's Hashem. If we miss the bus, it's the Rebbeinu Shalom. And each one of those things brings us one step closer. I'm not going to go into the other two of Chaver Tov and Shochein Tov. Those really are opportunities to help us get there. A Chaver brings us there. A Shochein is a Chaver that's there on a regular basis. So we have that brings us closer. But the next one, of Royas HaNoilad, what does that mean? If a person is Royas HaNoilad, Reb Shimon says Royas HaNoilad. If we understand that every move that we make in life is something that's bringing us closer or further from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the Rebbeinu Shalom is playing a role in our lives. Now, one may ask, I still remember talking with my son-in-law, who, when my daughter, they were newlyweds, and they were going, I was driving them to the airport, they were going on their vacation, their first vacation, and they were talking about, the food of the kashrus of the food over here, kashrus of the food over there, and like a good shver, I turned around and I said, don't forget, it's not just the food that needs to be kosher. So my son looked at me and says, up until now I had a hard time relating to you as a shver. Now I can. It's not a problem. But bottom line is that because when we go, so you might ask, what does vacation have to do with Yad Hashem? Vacation is kind of like a time off. No, but everything is the Rebbeinu Shalom. How we talk to people. There's no such thing as the Rebbeinu Shalom is in the Beis Medrash. And when we're in the workplace, it's something else. Hashem is with us. Harayas HaNoilad. All of our actions have reactions. All of our actions will either be something that will be bringing us closer, that will be loved by Hashem, or the opposite. And that really is Roya Es HaNoilad. And that really is what is, we have to be aware. We have to be aware that the Rebbeinu Shalom plays a role in our life. In everything that we do. Nothing is coincidence, not good, not bad. So those who see Rabbi Biederman's daily stuff, so he sent out today, said that there was a doctor asked someone to sign that he was giving him a very serious operation. And he told him, I need you to sign, because it's such a risky thing, I'm taking a risk on you, I need you to sign that whatever happens, you're accepting. And you're not going to hold me responsible. So the guy answered him, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll sign it, but then you have to sign that if it works out, you also have to admit that you're not responsible. The bottom line is, it's the Rebbeinu Shalom is with us in everything, if it does work out, if it doesn't work out. And in a sense, that's what the Meraglim were missing. That's what Klal Yisroel was missing at that time. There were two times that Klal Yisroel was at the apex. They were at the highest madrega that people could be. Well, that's Klal Yisroel. Adam Rishon in Gan Eden was the perfection, right? Klal Yisroel at Har Sinai, we were given two kisarim. We had, through Naaseh and Nishma, we had raised to such an incredibly high madrega. We had the two kisarim, and yet both of those situations did not end well. Adam was thrown out of Gan Eden, and Klal Yisroel had the ego. What's pshat? So the Sefer Shalom talks about this, and he says that in those situations, we didn't work to get to where we were. The relationship wasn't built in that way. Klal Yisroel went from the lowest madrega of Tumah to being ready for Matan Torah. They took the express. And sometimes, when you take the express, the relationship is missing. Adam Rishon, it's not his fault. It's not like he had an opportunity for a relationship and he blew it. He didn't have the opportunity. He was just thrown into Gan Eden. But we have that opportunity. We have the opportunity to work on the relationship through dveikus, through this idea of feeling the Rebbeinu Shalom in our life. And if we want to understand Emunah and Bitachon is that we live with Hashem. We live with Hashem when things are good, when things are bad, when things are in the middle. right? We throw around the words Baruch Hashem, Emir Hashem. Is Rabbi Shalom really playing a role? Like, say, every Rebbe's favorite line, you say Emir Hashem. You be by Shachris tomorrow, you say Emir Hashem. Right away, Rebbe says, I guarantee you the Rabbi Shalom wants. You don't have to worry. But as Hashem, the Rabbi Shalom will help. But are these just words, or do we ultimately mean it? Is there dveikus? So how do we understand dveikus? So again, going back to Siva Shalom, he says that it's a combination of ahava and yira. Right? If we have a right combination of ahava and yira, that is the ultimate how we get close to Hashem. If we just fear the Rabbi Shalom, there isn't that closeness. And if it's just ahava, just simcha, it's very nice, but that's not the real deal. Because the Rabbi Shalom, there's a certain amount of yira, I don't mean fear. It's interesting, I said this before, but depending upon the age, right? You'll ask a group, what's more important, ahava or yira? So, or simcha and yira. So below a certain age, they all say simcha, and above a certain age, they all say yira. Anyone can read into that however they want, but bottom line is that those two things working together, each one by itself is not appropriate. Working together, that's right. But what's the right, we'll say the right formula? Is it 50-50, 70-30? How does that work? So to understand this, Rav Wolbe, when he explains in Chelik Beis, in his Hakdama to the whole section on Simcha, he explains Simcha is not maybe how sometimes we teach Simcha. It's not a piece of chocolate. It's not a geschmacke song. What is real Simcha? Simcha is relationship. There's nothing that's more simchadik than when a person feels the depth of a close relationship. And that's real simcha, meaning that it's not simcha tluya b'davar, it's not something that depends on something else, because other things, they come, they go. Chocolate you eat, it's gone. It might be the simcha to have it, but eventually it doesn't make it. So real simcha is the relationship. What's real yira? So first of all, the word fear is definitely not the right way to go. I've said before, sometimes it's good we use the word awe and hope that our Talmidim don't understand what it means and we don't have to explain it. But what exactly is yira? So Rav Wolbe explains yira is not fear. He says it actually comes from the word roya, from the word to be able to see. What's yira? To have a real understanding and real depth of seeing the Rebbeinu Shalom, perceiving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything that we do. If we have that we're awed. Wow. The Rebbeinu Shalom is here. He's taking care of everything. He's doing all of us. It's a profound awareness of everything in our life comes from Hashem. That's yira. So if yira is the deepest of the relationships and simcha is the connection, they're not opposites, right? As we might think, yira and simcha, they're not opposites, says Rav Wolbe. They work together. The two of them work together because you can't have a closeness if you don't have a relationship. Then it's just a closeness to chocolate, which we're going to assume you don't have a relationship with, right? But if you have the relationship, that builds the closeness. The closeness comes from a deep understanding of who the Rebbeinu Shalom is, and that causes you to take a step back and say, oh, whoa, the Rebbeinu Shalom has done all this for me. He's created this world. He's created a world that I live in. He's created my life. Saila Toiv, Saila Ra, better things, but it's all coming from him. That creates a certain level of, again, the fear is not the right word, but a certain respect, a deep respect that comes. And simcha comes that because that respect is coupled with the relationship with Hashem. It's not to be afraid of Hashem, but it's ultimately to be close. And how do we get there? The Torah. Torah and mitzvahs is what brings us. That is the connection. For your wife, maybe it's flowers. For the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's Torah and mitzvahs. That's how we make the connection. We're not doing it for him. We're doing it for ourselves, ultimately to create that connection. And that's why. Sadly, when you see someone who goes through their day, and you have people, they get up in the morning and they daven, and then they go to Daf Yomi, and then they work, and then they come home exhausted, and they still go out to learn, and yet, zero feeling. Why? Because they're missing that simcha. They're missing. There's no relationship there. There's no one on the other side. It's like talking into a phone, and no one's there. Right? A child that doesn't have a concept of Hashem, so they'll talk, and they'll think they're talking to nobody. Right? It's like talking to a toy phone. But a person who they know that their tefillos are going straight to the Kisei HaKavod. But that only comes with a knowledge and an understanding. And once you bring this all around to the whole concept of Emunah, when you come to that place, that's how you can ultimately understand Emunah. So when we do those mitzvahs, it's not just because the Torah said, but it's creating the closeness. And that's why we have two, we'll say, maybe opposing psukim with the word of simcha. We have on one side, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. Now, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha sounds nice, but if I was thinking the Avodas Hashem should be maybe b'yira, maybe with a certain level of seriousness, with a certain level of zrizus, his harus, whatever, but b'simcha. If I can't, simcha might cause it, you're not even going to do it so well because you're dancing, singing, whatever you might be. But no, that's not simcha. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, with relationship. Realize that there's a Rebbeinu Shalom on the other side. Realize that what you're doing is connected to Hashem. And then we understand that we try to understand in Parashat Kisava how you have all of the klolos that will come to Klal Yisrael for not having simcha. That's where all the klolos are coming from. But again, it doesn't mean happiness. It means depth of relationship. And if we don't have that, then really we don't have anything. The Beis Avram tells us that of the pasuk, Moshe nigash el ha'arafel. Moshe, when he was coming to Rebbeinu Shalom by the snap, he went to the arafel. What is arafel? So it means a cloud, darkness. But really, there are three madregas of darkness: choshech, anon, and arafel. Choshech, dark, but all different madregas, and arafel is the deepest level of darkness. Why is it that this first connection the Rebbeinu Shalom had with Moshe Rabbeinu had to take place in the arafel of all places? Why, and why do I care? The Rebbeinu Shalom was sending a message that you're going to connect to me in the darkest of places. You're going to Mitzrayim, you're going to be speaking to Klal Yisrael, and there's going to be a Jewish history throughout that's full of arafel. Sadly, we know this all too well. But understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom is with us, even in the arafel. And our job is to internalize. The Siva Shalom says there are three levels of Emunah: Moyach, Leiv, and Evarim. We can understand it intellectually. Intellectually, we understand that there is such an idea of Emunah. There must be the concept of Hashem. Things don't happen by themselves. It must be coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Leiv is a little bit deeper. We feel it in our hearts. What's Evarim? Evarim is that we feel it in our limbs. How does someone feel Emunah, bitachon, in their limbs? What exactly does that mean? So I was thinking, okay, I was starting up with the whole family. Now I did my kids, now I'll do my wife. But a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, it was really early on in this whole movement. My wife gave a kidney, donated a kidney to a total stranger. Purely, not easy being married to holy people, but, and she was expecting shortly after, and the doctor did a sonogram, and the doctor said, I'm really sorry, but we see that there's a problem with the kidneys. The kidney is crushed. One of the kidneys is crushed. It's hard to see in a sonogram, but we're concerned. And my wife came home, and she tells me, and I said, you look not concerned. She goes, I'm not. She says, if it be any other part of his body, one thing. But a kidney, I just gave it. The Rebbeinu Shalom's not doing that. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is the right way to go with your Emunah and Bitachon, but that was where she was holding. So I'm not worried. And the doctors were concerned. They even spoke to me privately, maybe to get a social worker. She's not accepting the situation. So they said there was going to be a kidney specialist on hand at the birth to right away bring the baby to check out to see what they could do for the kidney. Maybe there's kidney specialist came and they did whatever test he needed to do. He said, I don't know what to tell you. He said, I saw the crushed kidney on the sonogram, and it's like someone took a straw and blew air into the kidney and made it whole. I can't explain it. Okay, I wasn't complaining, but Lemaisa, when we talk that, I believe my wife's cheshbon was that's called Emunah in the Evarim. It's so much a part of you. It's not just it's not an intellectual idea. It's not just in the moyach. It's not just in the leiv. It's in the Evarim. It's totally a part of you. About a month later, I brought to the specialist, and he was looking at the kidney, and he just couldn't get over it. And I remember the line he told us, it's such a pity I'm frum, because I would have become frum from this, but you should have bred it to a friar doctor. You could have made him frum, but it's too late. Yeah, but that's really, that's called Emunah in the Evarim. I want to end off with a thought. Gemara Pesachim, Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, talks about that there's a Mogen Avram and there's a Mogen David. Not the star, but what do we have? Mogen Avram we have in Shemona Esrei, and we have Esemach David, but we don't have Mogen David. Right? After the Haftarah, correct. We do have it in the Haftarah though, right? But if we have Esemach David and we have a bracha in Shemona Esrei about David, why not bring in Mogen David also? We bring in Magen Avram, why not bring in Magen David as well? So, the truth is that there's a difference between Magen Avram and Magen David. Each one is a different nekuda, really, even within Emunah. I heard this story from Rav Gusman Zatzal, who was a Rashiv in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Gusman lived a very, very difficult life. They say of a story that he was, one of his Talmidim once did something as an avla, and he came and he apologized. Rav Gusman told him, he said, let me tell you, he said, I was put on, I think he was 20 years old, I was put on the Bezdin of Rav Chaim Oizer. They stood up for me and gave me covet at that age. And I had that was the biggest covet in the world, and I had the biggest tsar in the world burying a child in the woods when they was hiding from the Nazis. There's nothing you can do that will affect me. I've had it either way. That was Rav Gusman. So Rav Gusman would give a share to a very diverse group. It wasn't just, typical, maybe we think of that, Rashiva, tzaddik of that stature. And he had someone in his group, Professor Alman, who was a Nobel Prize winner for math. Not something I can relate to, but he was and this Professor Alman unfortunately lost a son in one of the Israeli wars. He was a soldier. And Rav Gusman came to Menachem Ovel. Rav Gusman told him, I'm a kind of you. He said two things. He said, number one, he says, you know where your son is buried. And number two is your son died for a purpose. My son, I don't know. I don't know what the story is where he is. Both our sons died al Kiddush Hashem. But there was a purpose. There's a future. There's something. You can go to a kever. He was fighting for Eretz Yisrael. There's something there. In that difference, in that tragic difference, lies the difference really between Magen Avram and Magen David. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes and talks about the survival of Klal Yisrael being a nace. Lahavdil Elif Alfa. Oh, so does Mark Twain. But it's just interesting. Why do I bring up Mark Twain? Because I've noticed sometimes when you speak, you bring down, Mesilas Yesharim, people, okay. You say a quote from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, everyone's paying close attention. But Mark Twain says it also, that we don't make sense. It doesn't make sense that every other nation that went through, look, could you imagine walking over to someone in the DP camps after the war was over, or even someone in the concentration camps, B'shas Ma'aseh, the war, said, by the way, not that long, there's going to be kosher sushi on every corner. Okay, maybe not that, but whatever. There's going to be huge Batei Midrashim all over the place. They'd think you're crazy. How in the world we're sitting here, we're a remnant, we're just a little bit of Klal Yisrael here. Every Rebbe, if they had any Hasidim, you're going to tell me that Bubba's going to be so huge, and now Baruch Hashem, they split. We have two on each one, or three, or four. I think I don't know. The kids, we don't make sense. That was the promise that Avram Avinu was given. That is Magen Avram. Avram Avinu was given the promise, and this is what we have to bring into ourselves, and like we said, to teach to our children as well, that Magen Avram is Klal Yisrael, Netzach Yisrael, we will be here. And we'll be here, and we'll be stronger, and regardless of any difficulties that we go through, we're going to re-emerge as we have. But Magen David, we're not at yet. The Rambam says, in Hilchos Melachim, that there'll be Mashiach ben David. There will be a Melech. But that's Magen David. It's not in Shemona Esrei because it's not here yet. It's actually interesting that they say in the Haftarahs it's there, because the Haftarahs usually talk about, not usually, but they talk about either Malchus based David or the future. And therefore there it makes sense. So Rav Gusman was saying his child was part of the Magen Avram, it was in the destruction. So to Professor Alman, he said, at least your child will, Be'ez Hashem, be from the Magen David, from the rebuilding. Something we thought not possible. And what we have to really, to pretty much to end off, is that we have to make it real. We spoke about the Evarim, to bring it into the Emunah Be'evarim, to really take everything that we have, everything that we've accomplished, and realize the Rabbi Shalom is there. And it's hard, who do we see it the most by? Yosef HaTzadik. Right? Where else do you see this idea of someone who lived with the Rabbi Shalom? Yosef is given an opportunity to free himself from jail. Would anyone have blamed him if he went running and saying, oh, I got this, okay? I'm going to do it. Elokim Yana, the Rabbi Shalom, it's all in Hashem's. Can you imagine what it was for someone in that state to say it's all in the Rebbeinu Shalom's hands, if we go ahead and we come up with this amazing weapon or some other way to win a war or something, are we ready to say, Elokim Yaneh Shloim, that it's all going to be the Rebbeinu Shalom? Do we have that ability? Do we have the ability? Yosef lived with Hashem. When he was in jail, he lived with Hashem, and when he was out of jail, he lived with Hashem. And when he had an opportunity to save himself, it was also the Rebbeinu Shalom. Okay, it's a madrega. Something for all of us to strive for, but specifically, we're given the opportunity in difficult times. You know, I had the opportunity to speak to some survivors from October 7th massacres, from the music festival. And I asked one of them, I said, I'm trying to understand this. Usually, if someone does something to you, someone hits you, you run away from the person. Okay? You all got a patch from the Rebbeinu Shalom, you're running to Hashem. All these guys now. I was speaking to, I said I have Talmidim who were in the army. He said, Rebbe, you have no idea what's going on. He said, it's not, I'm sure people have heard and seen whatever, but he said, it's unbelievable. He compared it to, there's the old mice on the Chelm shoelace, where the guy from Chelm, he got a new shoelace, and he's looking down his shoes. He says, Pasnish, such beautiful shoelaces, such ugly shoes. So he got new shoes. Then he says, nice shoes, nice shoelaces, ugly suit. So he gets himself a new suit. And before he knows it, not going to go through the whole thing. He ends up with a new house. But he said, a guy goes ahead, and he's wearing tzitzis, but he's not wearing a yarmulke. So he puts on a yarmulke. Tzitzis and yarmulke without tefillin. So he puts on tefillin. Tzitzis, yarmulke, tefillin without Shabbos. He says, it's unbelievable. He said, what's going on? You can't imagine. But we got the patch, and we ran towards Hashem, not away from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's Yad Hashem. That's the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the people having the ability. And I asked someone, he said, because if the Rebbeinu Shalom did this, I can understand it. I can understand. If it was, you're going to tell me this was random? This could not have been random. This could not have been, and that's why he said it happened that day. That day, he looked around him, he saw destruction. He said, I looked up, he said, okay, I got it. I know what I have to do now. It's very sad sometimes that it takes these horrible situations, these horrible things, the messages that the Rebbeinu Shalom sends us. But the Rebbeinu Shalom is sending us messages constantly. It's up to us to hear them. And to remember that, like we said, the Rebbeinu Shalom is in everything. I end off with a quote. I don't remember who I heard it from. If anyone knows, let me know so I can start attributing it to the right place. But those who leave everything in Hashem's hands see Hashem's hands in everything. And that's really what it is. The Rebbeinu Shalom is there. If we know that we did our shtadlus, like we said, we did our shtadlus until the right point, then we can realize the Rebbeinu Shalom is taking care of the rest. Thank you very much.
Shem Yegen Shir Terem, Mrs. Boston, Atkubig Ashikoyach, Rabbi Grossberg, tonight's Drasha. Rabbi Yisroel, I'd like to see some mishtadlus from the Olam and sponsoring the Shiurim. Don't leave everything up to Rabbi Shalom. Call up 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com and sponsor a shir and have a chelik abotzas Torah derabim of Yegen Shir Torah. Tonight's shir was learned as chusuf for Shlema for Bnos and Meir ben Hadassah b'soy shechel Yisroel. It was learned as chusuf for Shlema for Peril Esther b'schava b'soy shechel Yisroel. Yashikach warm for coming. Chananya ben Akash Emrot Hakadosh Baruch Hu lezakes es Yisroel afigur hibron Torah mitzvah shenema adonai chofetz and matzidkoi yagdol Torah v'yader.